welcome to the Locker Room Chats. The first of many more podcasts to come that will highlight athletes, coaches, officials, teams, and great events, moments and accomplishments, and the history of sports in Tacoma and Pierce County. Hosted by the Shaneman Sports Museum of Tacoma, Pierce County, today's edition is sponsored by Giuseppe's Italian Ristorante in Tacoma and the Tacoma Pierce County Baseball Softball Old Timers Association. I'm Doug MacArthur, and while I hadn't planned on resurrecting my broadcasting career at the age of 90, I'm happy to spend the next hour or so with some good memories about baseball with two great players, local players, Steve Whitaker and Earl Hyder. I want to welcome them both to us, and I want to say we're going to take them back 65 years.
Let's do it.
What do you think, Earl?
Good trick if you can do it.
Okay, well, the real bind for us, the thing that binds us together is we all went to Lincoln High School. And so we would probably start with a yell. I'm an old cheerleader. We're from Lincoln High School. No one could be prouder. If you don't believe us, we'll yell a little louder, okay?
There you go. There you go.
Steve, let's start with you. You're the youngest, I think.
By little.
When did you start baseball in Tacoma Pierce County?
I started when I was 7. Started really loving baseball on that 90-inch screen TV that we used to have to watch back in the day. But it was very young. Used to go out and just bounce the ball against my dad's garage door, if nothing else. But if Pee Wee ball was over there at Peck's Field, Bob McGinnis, who became a teammate of mine with Earl Hyder and so, was our usually umpired our games. But it was just a memory of the Tacoma Boys Club playing at Peck's Field until I finally got picked up by what Ben Cheney would say the big leagues, the Cheney Studs.
I have mentioned many times that the late 50s and early 60s in Tacoma and Pierce County was actually the most challenging amateur baseball you could find in the nation. And we'll talk about that as we move along. Earl, when did you start baseball? What age? Do you remember?
The first memory I have of baseball was when I was born in Tennessee. And I was too young to go to school at that time. But I was a little big for being that age. And I remember being out on a play field, and it was recess time, and they were playing softball. And the first time I'd ever seen a softball or ever seen anything, somebody hit a fly ball to center field. And darn if I didn't go back and one-hand that ball. That was the greatest feeling I've ever had in my life, I think.
So you made your greatest catch at your earliest age.
About 4 years old. Yep.
Okay. Both of you played baseball at Lincoln.
Yes.
And who did you play for? And tell us a little bit about baseball at Lincoln in those ages, huh? Earl?
Well, Bill Mullins has been the coach there for 100
Forever.
years, it seemed like.
He was coach there when I was there.
And what a good man. He was not just a good coach, he was a great man. And he coached you and taught you in quiet type ways. He was not a holler or a yeller like a Joe Budnick. And Budnick had his great points too, as all coaches do if you last that long in the game. But gosh, I felt like I got the best training I could from the people that were available to do it. So I've enjoyed my baseball life, and it's hard to think about it without bringing up all kinds of old memories.
You were a three-sport athlete. Was baseball your favorite?
Oh, baseball's the toughest game there is to play. I was a competitor. I wanted competition. And the better the competition, the better I enjoyed playing. Yeah, in football, I was all city, all state. In football and in basketball, I never really played much varsity ball, but in rec ball, I had a 57-point night one night, so had pretty good eye-hand coordination and pretty good coordination.
I remember those days pretty well, Earl, because I broadcast many of your games on KTAC radio at the time. Steve, you were coached at one stage by Joe Budnick. How'd that happen?
And he was awesome, tough. You know, he smoked cigars and he was tough, and but he was also a mentor, because he made you understand that this is a real team now. We're not just messing around here. We're here to win. And we had the players that knew that, and so it wasn't like just, you know, fooling around. We win, we lose. No, we're there to win, and you understood that playing for him. But I, along with the Earl and the other and Bob McGinnis and guys like yourself, that we didn't have to be reminded of that. You know, it was just a great honor to be selected to play on that stage with the Cheney Studs. So that was my big leagues at an early age. Yeah.
Well, you have to remember that Budnick was a rival of mine at certain times.
I do know that.
And so I knew how competitive Joe was. And as we get into that, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. When he first picked you up, so to speak, you were playing American Legion ball.
I was playing for the Cheney Studs, American Legion ball. Andy Garnes was our coach. Loved him to death, and we played most of our games down at the Old Tiger Stadium down there on 38th Street. And playing for him, I think I was like, 14 or something. I hit my first home run, real home run, over that fence at Tiger Stadium. And I slept with my bat for a week. It was the most best feeling I've ever had in my life. And he cherished us as players, and he was just a real good coach.
Earl, do you remember how you got involved? Let's talk about the Schumann ahead of the Studs. Only because the Schumann won it in 56, the Studs won it in 60. You were involved in both.
Well, what brought me into it was Bob McGinnis. He was a real good friend of mine, and we would be back and forth to each other's house on days off. We would meet at UPS, which was CPS at that time, and we would get a bag of balls, and we always brought home 3 or 4 bats with us when we came home. And we would sit there by the hour, and we'd get Steve and different people to shag and hit, and it didn't take long to see his swing that you knew that he had something going. So we put our time in, I'll tell you that.
As you know, I played at CPS with Bob McGinnis. We were teammates, and so that's how the thing got started. I tried to put some amateur baseball together when I was at Lincoln High School because I couldn't make the Lincoln team. And that's a long story, but 3 sport athletes were big in those days, and the Bobby McGuires and Gordy Brunswicks, all who went on to play pro ball, they were there. Anyway, the very first one I put together, we had all the guys who were rejected from Lincoln, and we went into the Valley League. And the only guy that had played baseball was a pitcher named Johnny Scalera. So he was our ace, so to speak. But it was an ace among what. Anyway, to make a long story short on that one, we met what eventually turned out to be the Woodworth Contractors. They were at 6th Avenue. They were really good. They were really the old pros of Tacoma. And so our debut in Valley League baseball was 18-0. We got beat. So, but anyway, when we several of us got out of the service together, and that's how the Schumann were developed. And Mac was involved, and we were to a point where we didn't have a sponsor. And so a guy named Mal Stevens, who was the recreation director at Western State Hospital, said, "I'll sponsor you. You play in the Valley League for our patients." So we played every Sunday in the Valley League of Patients. Soon Stan Nacarado found out about us. I think he probably umpired a game and found out we weren't too bad. And so he decided he'll sponsor us in the City League. So that's how that all developed. We won the City League championship in 1955, and went into the 1956 season, which was an all-time season here in Tacoma in terms of Cheney Studs, Woodworth Contractors, Stanley's, Schumann. What do you remember about that, Earl?
Well, I knew that if you didn't show up to play ball, you were going to get yourself beaten real quick. There were 3 really good ball clubs, and there was no room for mistakes. You had to do it right. So it was a good experience.
You remember that group?
Well, I mean, going back, I mean, he said it just like, there's a Yankee way. Well, the Cheney Studs were the Yankee way. In fact, Earl just reminded me about this. Our uniforms were Yankee uniforms, just with a big Cheney Stud on it. But
You're right. The pinstripes.
The pinstripes. So you had to come prepared. I learned. He's one of my mentors. You were one of my mentors. But Bob McGinnis, of course, and all the other teammates. They were mentors to me because I was young. Like I said, I was very, very young, and they had a lot more experience than me. But yeah, you didn't. And same thing playing with the Yankees. Bobby Richardson, all those guys, and Tony Kubek. They'd remind you, hey, we don't do it that way up here. You don't know how to throw and hit the cutoff man, or you don't know to keep that guy off of third base when he should have still been at second. No, it was that's just the Yankee way, and I always say that about the Cheney Studs. Yeah.
Well, to us, they were the Yankees, too. And our number one goal somehow was to beat them and go on. And that's kind of an interesting story, and I'll try not to take too long with it, but I will reminisce a little bit about it. Woodworth Contractors and the Stanley Schumann played in the Tacoma City League. The Cheney Studs played in the SeaTac League. So in the Tacoma City League, the Schumann, won the first half league championship, and the Contractors won the second half league contract. So we play them in a game at Tiger Park for the City League title and a berth in the state tournament.
There you go.
Late in the game, and Earl gets a kick out of this too. I do too now, but not then. Bob McGinnis steps out of the batter's box with runners on, and we were down a couple runs, and the umpire won't give him time. The umpire had it several times. He was a Fort Lewis guy, and there was a little prejudice in him, I think. But anyway, he wouldn't give Mac time, okay? So Mac, I'm coaching third, and Mac says, motions for me to come down. So I get about halfway down, and the guy tells me, you get back to that coaching lines or you're done here. Well, we did get a little heated, both Mac and I, with him, and he eventually tossed Mac, and then he tossed me. Me being tossed was a little unfair because I was trying to get Dale Bloom to handle our pitchers and so forth, and anyway, I got tossed, and that resulted in what Earl, would you describe it as a brawl?
We had several.
Yeah, but anyway, a lot of those guys were friends of ours too. So a lot of the brawl was Chuck Lodi holding McGinnis high off the ground. Lodi was about 6'4" or 5" and 230, and McGinnis is flailing away in the air. But anyway, we forfeit the game. Well, we think that's the end of the season for us. It so happened Tacoma City League had 2 spots in the state tournament, so we were granted number 2. Well, in our own youthful way, we said, to hell with it. If you're going to allow that to happen to us, we're not going to play.
Yeah. Good story. Good story.
To make a long story shorter, Tom Cross, who was the head of baseball, and he's the reason we had several hundred teams, let's be honest. Tom was a great guy. Mm-hmm. He came to me and he said, Doug, do you really want it to be this way? Do you want to be the team that forfeited the whole city title and the chance to play for the national tournament? So anyway, to make a long story short, we accepted, and Earl will remember we got together as a team and decided no more arguing with the umpire. We'll take our medicine, whatever happened. And in the opening round of the state tournament, we drew the Cheney Studs. Monty Geiger was on his game, set us down 3-1. we were best of sports. And we congratulated them, and we felt that put them on the way to the state championship. Well, as fate would take, and I'll try not to take much more time, but as fate would have it, we came up through the losers bracket, and we won every
Won
game.
everything.
And I can remember Cross saying, "You guys have a chance to win it all," and I said, "Tom, I don't think we can do that." What we did, and we ended up meeting the Studs in a doubleheader, of which we had to win both games. Anyway, in that game, Russ Wilkerson had off Monty Geiger, who came back to pitch against us, hit the center field wall at Tiger Park, 4:35 mark, and we won 9-4 and 17-3, and went on to Watertown, South Dakota, for the regionals and on to the nationals, where we won it. So it was a great moment.
It was.
But there again, and I don't think there's any question, the Studs and the Contractors were the two best baseball teams we played, all the way to South Dakota and all the way to Battle Creek, Michigan.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we won the national title over East Chicago, Indiana, 10-0. And we'll always remember that Dale Bloom happened to be on the mound for every one of our games, state, national, and championship
Yeah,
games.
he was awesome. He was awesome.
Yeah. So that's the hotbed of and Steve, you got hooked up then with the 1960 Cheney Studs, not before that, right?
No, they called me up. We had a real good Legion team, and Bob Dugal remembers on that team. We had a few guys, but the whole thing with Andy Garnes had a lot to do with it. Just kind of like letting them know what I'm doing with the Legion team and all that stuff. And again, Budnick got word of it, and I don't know if it was Ben Cheney that tried to put some push on that, but I was just a young kid that got the opportunity to come out and play with these guys, and didn't play a lot, but when I did, they put me in. I was able to have some success, and I'd tell Earl that was me getting the confidence at that level and being so young to put me towards a professional career. I really believe that. Yeah.
Go over that pro career a little bit for us, will you?
Well, it was a ride. I wasn't in the minor leagues long, but if you looked at my baseball cards, it looked like I played 20 years in the minor leagues, because they were shifting me around. There were some trouble spots in between that I'm not going to really go into, but as far as just, things happen, and different towns, they like me as a player. They like my swing. They like my arm. And I could run. I mean, I had 5 tools. I could do a lot of things, but my career was up and down as far as they took me to Idaho Falls. I only got up a couple times in Idaho Falls. Next thing I know, I'm being sent to Shelby, North Carolina, and then just different teams. But the first year I played professionally, I led the league in home runs, the one league, with 9, because the fields were like humongous, and I got 9 home runs and about 200 and some at bats. So that worked the Yankees up. The Yankees said, "Well, wait a minute, he hit 270, 245, whatever it was in average, but I had some pop." And so then they put me to. I got in a little trouble the following year, and in spring training, I broke my wrist and had a little mishap in a bar. I mean, so I busted my wrist, and I didn't want the Yankees to know that it happened in a fight. So I went back to my room and pretend, because we had bats in the room. I said, "I've tripped over some bats," and so they bought it, and they casted me up. I was out 6 weeks starting the season in Greensboro, which was the Carolina League, and I'm sitting on the bench going over my career thinking, geez, I got to start straightening this thing out. And whatever I could work-wise with the cast on, I did, but I ended up that season with 28 home runs and 110 RBIs and hit 303. So that was when the Yankees invited me to spring training the following year. So
Well, you had some big moments though with the Yankees.
I had some big moments.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about those.
Well, I was just saying a little bit. When I first got called up, the first 10 days in the big leagues, we were facing Detroit, Anaheim. We were facing some teams back then that had some good players. I mean, good pitchers. And I had 5 home runs the first 10 days I was in the big leagues. Grand Slam. K-Line tried to get inside the park when K-Line with Detroit tried to get a ball that I hit on the line, and he tried to make a snap at it and fell, and I got a grand inside the park home run. But I was on the paper, all the news and the Times, every day for the first couple weeks that I was in the big leagues. And then things happened. Mickey said, "You're coming downtown. You're going to start living downtown." So my buddy owned a Mr. Laughs down in Manhattan, 65th and First Avenue. Had the penthouse. He played for the Mets. I'm playing for the Yankees. We never roomed together, but he had this beautiful place above the most popular bar in town, and Mickey and I are out and about all the time. He lived on Central Park South. He took a liking to me, and we ran. Everybody else lived across the bridge in Jersey. So that might have been the kiss of death, because he came, we all came to the ballpark not ready to play some nights, and he could hit 2 home runs, and I'd take an offer, So those are the things I'd probably change out if I had to do that over again, because it was, I just had great ball players, and I felt like I disappointed someone when I did that.
Well, Earl, you found out that MacArthur had to have a fight, and he had to have a fight in the bar today. Tell us about your start in baseball, and tell us a little bit about the Studs and the Schumann, because you played with both in that span.
Well, I came home from the Korean War, and Chicago Cubs wanted to sign me. And it's a laughable thing, but they wanted to send me down to the A-League, which at that time, the A-League was really a good league, because they had B leagues, C leagues, D leagues, and 2 and 3 teams in each of those. And they were going to start me out in the Texas League at about 340 in the shade, and they're going to pay me. They were going to pay me $400 a month and give me a $1,500 bonus. Well, after just coming home from 2 years in the Korean War, that didn't sound too good, and I knew what Texas was like. So I said, I'll pass on that one. So I did, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call from Bob McGinnis, and he says, "Hey, you're home." And I said, "Yep, we're home." So he said, "Okay, we've got a ball club, and you're in it." And that's where we started. McGinnis was behind so many things.
Yeah.
He was really an active person. What a neat man he was. He was my best friend.
I know that.
He was great.
He was a friend to all of us.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell us about you had some great success in the Nationals and the Regionals. Tell us a little bit about those.
Oh, golly, I was a pretty good hitter. I consider myself a pull hitter, but I had pretty darn good power to the left center too. I've hit a lot of scoreboards out there, and in the national championship game, we won that game 3-1. And I ended up driving in all 3 runs, and I scored one of them with a home run with 2 out in the 9th inning. So just being in the right place at the right time, and I was fortunate enough that, hey, in most cases, I did what I had to do.
He had veins of steel. He wanted to be up there with the bases loaded. He wanted to be up there.
That was baseball.
You don't have to tell me. He played for me. Earl, I got a couple things I want to say. That, first of all, what you're just telling about here was with the Cheney Studs.
Yes.
So you won the first team to ever win that AABC championship from the West Coast were the Schumann.
Yes.
And so you tell us a little bit about that.
Well,
Watertown and buses instead of trains.
well, it was really odd in Watertown. It was a ballpark with a track running right back at second base across from left to right field. And we went up there and we just blitzed those guys like you wouldn't believe. And that kicked us off where we thought, well, hey, we're maybe good enough to do this. And luckily, we were in the right place, right time, and able to do what we had to do.
We beat Houston, Texas 7-6 in the second game of the national championships, and they were the defending champ.
Yep.
But Earl, do you recall when the Houston star third baseman came onto the field? That was your big contribution at that time.
Well, I come walking into the ballpark with the rest of the team, and they're having infield, and they're throwing the ball around. And I remember walking through the dugout to get around, and I kind of yelled out toward the field, "Where do you cowboys park your horses?" And the third baseman turned around and took a look and took a line shot right in the ribs. He was out for the whole tournament. And so that's kind of my big remembering of that one.
That was your contribution. What do you remember about the Nationals? They were in Battle Creek?
They were in Battle Creek, and again, we took the train, the Battle Creek. We were set up, and gosh, I mean, it was just, again, it was exciting because this is all new for me. I mean, we didn't, I've never really been on a stage like that, nationally staged at that young age. So I was like a kid in a candy store, just watching these guys perform and, you know, ready to play. But just it was just an awesome, and the games were tough. I mean, very, very good competition. But yeah, we came through. It was awesome.
The interesting thing that I remember is that you went on with the Seattle Pilots.
I did. That's a good story. Again, it's not a pretty story, but you got to realize we get. We were fighting for our union back then. We were fighting for free agency. We were fighting. I just tell the story just a little bit ago about my son Chad. Signed. He was the third pick in the '95 draft. He made more money signing that contract than most of us made 10 times more than we ever made in baseball because of what we created in our union, and I'm very proud of that. But I was playing winter ball in Puerto Rico. I get a phone call. I was drafted by Kansas City I was like the 10th pick in the draft in 1969. And God, looking forward to it, and really, you know, new career. I hated leaving the Yankees, but you know, things happen. And I get a phone call from Mo Drabowski. He said, you know, we're having some problems with our union, and you're one of the players that have some time under your belt in the big leagues, and we'd like you to not report to spring training. And I told him, I said, God, I went AWOL with the Yankees last year for a couple of weeks, and when I came out of the service, they wanted to send me down to AAA, and I didn't want to go. So that's a long story in itself. So I'm hiding out, and I didn't report for a couple of weeks. But anyway, I said, I got to be the first one there, Mo. I said, I got to be the first one there and really get my career back on start. So he said, well, I really appreciate if you didn't. You know, it's we got a problem that we're trying to correct. So long story short, I didn't report. Look at TV the day the spring training starts. 65 players report. 4 of us didn't. Joe Foy, Ed Kirkpatrick, Steve Whitaker, and Mo Drabowski. Wow. So I'm going, now my career is really down the tube. So I go to spring training 10 days later. Cedric Tallis was our general manager. Love him now. I'm good friends with him to this day. And we laugh about this. But he said, what in the heck were you thinking? And I just said, you know, this is our union, man. We're fighting for things. He said, well, I'm really disappointed. 10 days later, I'm traded to the Seattle Pilots for Lou Piniella. And Lou was a red hat. He got a little hot and carried away when he's playing for the Portland and the Pacific Coast League. I heard. I didn't know who he was at the time. But they made the switch, and the papers, I think it was Kansas City papers, and one red ass traded for another one. That was the thing that came out. So come to spring training, I fly into Tempe, and Cedric Tallis, our general manager of the Seattle Pilots, picks me up at the airport. Not one of his runners, but the general manager picks me up and he says, "If you pull any of that stuff with us, you'll be gone as soon as I can sign the paper." I had the best spring training in my life to make the Seattle Pilots. I think I hit 8 home runs that spring just to make the team, and and the rest is history. I love the Pilots. We could tell stories all day long about the Pilots. We had a great bunch of group of guys. They were all cast-offs. That's what we called ourselves, a bunch of cast-offs. But it was probably the best time, other than the Yankees, that I ever had in baseball. Yeah.
Earl, you went on from playing baseball and played a little slow pitch. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about the feeling of a ball player who was at the top of his game playing baseball, and when it came time to play slow pitch.
Well, if you're a ball player, you're going to play ball. And that's just about what it came down to, was there wasn't anything going on at that time. So a lot of the local guys and the athletes that we had in the area, they put together a fairly good ball club. And so I figured, hey, it beats the dickens out of going home and putting your feet up. So that's how we got into it.
Well, that was Marty Erdahl put Tucci and Sons together.
Yes.
And most of the players were from the Schumann or the Studs.
Yes.
And so we did have an awfully good team. But
Yes.
there's a real interesting story regarding that group. We won the Northwest Regional Championships to go back to Ohio for the national championships. And so we practiced like heck to get going back there, because we discovered that the 14-inch ball we'd been playing with all season long wasn't being played back there. It was a 12-inch baseball, and the teams were put together totally different than ours. So we had a veteran club that hit the ball. Jack Johnson and those guys were hammered the slow pitch ball. But the teams we played ran like crazy, and we won the first game. In fact, I have to make claim to being one of the great pitchers of all time. I pitched a shutout in the national championships opening game, a slow pitch shutout with my fastball, by the way. Anyway, we had a good time and a lot of fun, and we stayed. You played how many more seasons?
A softball or baseball. Softball, I played with several different teams, and it didn't take the place of baseball. And I guess I was a baseball dyed-in-the-wool player. And so the way things were done in softball I saw too much monkeying around, and let's all have a good time and go to the TAV, and I never was used to that type of thing.
You were pretty competitive, Earl.
Oh, yes, I was.
And that's what coaches liked about you,
Yeah.
believe me. Hey, how about some of your teammates over the years that you could tell us a little bit about? Do you remember some of those locally, and any bright moments about them?
Well, we'll start with the Cheney Studs, because that was
Right.
the last team that I went with. There was a real collection of University of Washington players on that team, and I became such close friends with George Kritsonis, the third baseman for it. He was a pitcher, third baseman. I've never seen anybody that could wait on that curveball and just rip it into left field.
In games we played against them, I can remember that vividly.
Yeah, the other curveball hitter that could wait on it was Dick Lack, another Abe.
Lincoln Abe,
Yep. He could wait on that darn curveball better than anybody. It seemed like he could rip that darn thing. But there was just a good group of athletes. It didn't matter what you wanted to play. There was going to be a good group of competition for you. And I love competition. To me, I don't want 12-1, 13-1. Hey, give me the old 2-1, 3-2 game to where everything means something. And I'll be happy with that one.
How about pitchers? Do you recall any pitchers that you had to face that you dreaded?
Oh, they had a left-hander out of Seattle that he was a big guy. Man, he could throw that ball hard, and he was just wild enough to make you start thinking about your kids and home, you know.
Do you remember what team that was?
God, I don't.
Okay, well,
But
how
boy,
about you, Steve? You remember the best pitchers you faced?
Oh God, I got to face them all. But
Everyone was.
no, I did. No, yeah, I mean, but the real, they all were good. Yeah, but you know, Koufax, Drysdale, Bob Gibson, Sudden Sam McDowell. I mean, Jim Palmer with Baltimore. I mean, you know, Longbird for Boston. I mean, you can go on and on and on about they all had some really unbelievable talent. And you know, it's funny because people say, did they throw that hard back then? Not only did they throw that hard, but they didn't, you weren't wearing all the junk and you weren't wearing all the helmets and all that kind of stuff. And if they took a part of the plate and brushed your back, they didn't get kicked out. I mean, Bob Gibson, if you looked and you had a really good day with a swing that day, I guarantee you he's going to knock you down because you're a little bit too happy up there.
Yeah.
And I looked at it as respect. All these guys want to fight. It misses them by a foot, man. They want to go out there and fight. Are you kidding me? You know, I mean, when I talk about getting thrown at, I'm talking about behind your head. We're not talking about missing you by a foot. And yet it was respect. So you get twirled down the ground a little bit, so you get up and brush yourself off and let's go at it again. But just a lot of great talent that you know, and they pitched. They took the ball. The starter took the ball back in those days to finish the game, not to pitch 5 innings. No, they wanted to finish the game. Nowadays they got everything specialized. You know, give me 5 innings, we'll bring someone in, you know, and then we'll bring the closer in. I still shake my head. Some of these closers, are you kidding me? They bring in gasoline instead of putting the fire out. They're making the fire bigger. So it's changed. And Earl and I were talking about that. And you know, the game has changed, and some good, some bad. I mean, I think fundamentally the game is terrible. And I'm here. I'll say it to anybody. I don't think they play the game. Baseball. They want to all be on ESPN at night to see who made the best catch. Are you kidding me? It is a ESPN reel, but you should have been there camping under it to throw the guy out at third base. I mean, so it's a big difference on how they're playing the game today. There's no arms. Earl could play the outfield. I mean, there was no arms today. Nobody can throw, and you know, it's kind of disappointing because I coach, I teach baseball, and I learned a lot through the years of the way I teach now was a lot different than a lot of things than how I played. Like I was a pull hitter. My son was a third pick in the '95 draft, and he could hit it left field, center field, and right field. He's a left-handed power hitter. I couldn't do that. But I teach that. I taught him as a kid. You got the right field line, you got the left field line, just like Earl could do. Hit the ball where the pitch and drive it hard, hit it hard someplace. I couldn't do that. But the ones that could and can, they're going to make a long, good career for themselves. So, but yeah, I mean, it was, we only had 8 teams. I mean, you got to look at the teams. I mean, now they got 30 teams. They're trying to stock 30 teams with talent, 25-man rosters. We had 16 teams and 24-man rosters. So to make a roster, you had to be able to play. I mean, you couldn't just have a couple of tools. You had to had pretty much all the tools in some way, or you can't make the Yankees. They're not going to put up with that. And that's why a lot of guys back in the day, I remember you had them in the Pacific Coast League, hit home runs one after the other, but they didn't have the other tools, so they became stays in the Pacific Coast League. And I got a mind blank right now, but you know who they are. I mean, they were some Bilko. I think Steve Bilko was one. Didn't he just dominate the Pacific Coast League for years?
I think so.
So, but anyway, it's changed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bilko was a 35 and up home run hitter every year, but he never had his hand out of his back pocket eating candy. So you could tell where his concentration was.
Yeah.
What do you think? Something that, as an old baseball guy, I can't help but be bothered by. Where in the devil did this 1-inning starter and a headliner possibly come in, and how can they regard that as being of any value? I mean, if you start somebody on the hill and they give 4 runs up, the poor starter's going to go in the second inning and he's down 4-0, and that happens more often than not.
All the above. Yes, I agree.
Well, but it goes back that we're not really necessarily playing baseball the way we grew up with it and understood it to be. My gosh, I see batters step into that batter's box right now. They are no more prepared to look and take that first pitch or hit it. They'll walk up there, take a pitch right down the middle.
Right down the can.
And then the next pitch bounces 2 feet in front of home plate, and they're swinging at it.
Yeah.
And they're falling down when they swing.
I did watch the Yankees and the Red Sox yesterday, and the Yankees had, I believe, 6 or 7 consecutive hits of the first pitch thrown to them.
Yep.
No, teaching, coaching with the White Sox, I was fortunate to be around their great ball players, and the game is it's the average is down. If you hit 200, but hit 25, 30 home runs, that's okay. Whereas they're leaving too many guys on base. They're not playing baseball as far as getting the runner over and driving them in.
Well, the Mariners don't even know what a bunt is.
But most of them don't.
If you want to talk about that, take a look at yesterday's Mariner game. Fly ball hit the center field, runner standing on second base with 1 out. He takes off for third.
Yeah.
And he's thrown out. Are you kidding me? If you did that in any team I ever played on, you might be lucky to get out alive.
No, they're condoning a lot of that too. I mean, with all the stats, they got things now in these spring trainings. When I was with the White Sox, I mean, they got all the stats you can get. Any player can go to the batting cages, and right next to the batting cages are these rooms with computers. You can look up the pitchers that's pitching against you tonight. You can see what you had success or not with the pitcher, what he likes to throw, when he likes to throw it. So you're starting to find a lot of kids that are guess hitters. They're not going up there to look for the ball necessarily and see and hit what you see. They're guessing, and that's why you see a lot of pitches taken right down the middle with 2 strikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, every at bat is, hey, if you're a ball player, every at bat is like life and death to you. And when I see people go up there and just nonchalantly wave one by and not even look at it.
Yeah, well, you can even see that happen three times in a row on some hitters.
That's because they're making
If
$20 million a year.
If we would have done that.
And speaking of that, how about salaries? Go back a little bit, will you, without embarrassing yourself?
Well, I remember Mickey hitting 56 home runs, and the year after that he hit 54, and he got a $5,000 cut. And I'll just tell you a quick story about me with the Yankees. After my first year, I mean, it wasn't anything, but for a young kid just coming up to the big leagues, I felt I deserved a raise. So I go to Lee McPhail was our general manager. I said, and we're baseball rats. We're in the clubhouse. We don't know these big, high executive offices with the suits. So I made my appointment to go to Yankee Stadium, and it was in the paper that we were having a little problem. So I go there to ask for my money, and Lee McPhail, right in the door, he says, "Steve, what does your father do back in Tacoma?" I says, "He owns Les's Tavern on 48th Street in Tacoma. He owns a bar, and then he welds during the day. My mom runs the bar, and then at night he comes and relieves my mom." And he looks at me and he says, "Did you ever think about being a bartender?" and in other words, what in the heck are you doing in this office asking for any money? You're wearing the pinstripes. And I shut the door. I'm not going to tell you what I said, but I went and shut that door, and I did say things like, "Are you disrespecting me?" I said, I don't like to be disrespected like that. And that's how they treated you back in those days, and that's why I got so involved even more after that with the union, because they didn't care about you as far as anything other than you're here, you don't deserve anything else. And that's with 8 teams. I mean, we were better than that. So yeah, I got very involved after that.
Well, let's go back for a second here to amateur baseball, okay? What perks or reasons do you have to choose a team? McGinnis talked you into it in the Schumann. But what are the things you look for in amateur baseball?
I wanted people that came to play. And if you didn't come to play, then I didn't want to be there. I just don't understand. I can't understand you're making the money these people make nowadays. And I know I never was a pro, but my God, if I ever stepped in the batter's box, I guarantee you my mind was 1,000% on that strike zone. Nowadays they act like, oh, no big deal. Are you kidding me? What are they doing up there then? Man.
Yeah, it's my thing growing up. Again, was I went to the Tacoma Boys Club,
Right.
and Ben had Cheney had people out there, coaches and people in general, parents maybe of other kids, but they put the word out that you ought to go talk to the. You were actually recruited to play for the Cheney Studs at a young age, whether it be football, basketball, baseball. They had the best uniforms. Tacoma Boys Club, we had hand-me-downs, leather helmets, Hooker Chemical uniforms that were been passed down probably for 50 years, and they smelt like it. And all of a sudden, somebody's asking you, "Would you like to play for the Cheney Studs?" Are you kidding me? Lead me to the door. I mean, it was just when you put that uniform on that Ben always had the best uniforms. It was like you're in the big leagues, or you're in the NFL, or you're playing in the NBA. It was just unbelievable.
Well, we were blessed in Tacoma to have someone like Ben Cheney.
Oh.
He cared about baseball. And I think, that's why it was a Cheney Field where we played at Old Tiger Park. There's now a Cheney Stadium. I looked it up on the internet the other day, looked back on his teams. I coached some of his kids' teams, and I can recall very definitely how the kids wanted to play for you because you were coaching the Cheney Studs.
Absolutely.
And that held true not just in football, but basketball and baseball as well. We need more Ben Cheneys in the world, but he certainly was an unforgettable person as far as I'm concerned, and one of the great people to ever live in Tacoma.
No
He was
doubt.
one of a
No
kind.
doubt. No doubt. I used to sleep with those jackets. We used to get these nice jackets that he'd give us. I mean, it was are you kidding me? I'd sleep with those dang things. It was just like, wow. And that Cheney Stud, you tell me, where do you find anything more unbelievable to look at than that Cheney Stud? I mean, and here it is right here. If that doesn't tell a story, right? No, it was just awesome.
Well, it means something.
Yeah.
When a logo means something, you're going to have yourself a good ball club because you've put together hey, you got to do it the right way. Listen to what I tell you, not what I do necessarily. But hey, we can win this thing, but you're only going to do it if you do it the right way.
Yeah.
There it is.
And going back to those three clubs that played for everything, one wins the city title, one wins the state championship, one wins the SeaTac League, and another wins the national. That gives you a little indication. But what's really interesting, I think, about that whole thing is how determined you were when you played, for example, against the Cheney Studs.
Yeah, absolutely.
How determined. And we were blessed with the Schumann, the year we won it in '56. In that, and I certainly don't mean this against the players we had to leave home, but both Russ Wilkerson and Gordy Hersey, who were our shortstop second base, were excellent players. But they both had coaching responsibilities and had to stay home. Then if you won the state championship, you could pick up one or two pitchers from the other team. And you could only choose from one team. So we had to make a decision. The Woodworth Contractors, who had Donnie May and Oren Anderson, I think it was. He was a shortstop. Or the teeny stud.
Rod Keel.
Rod Keel, right. And so then, who was an ace at Washington State and pitched in the national championship game against
Yep.
Texas. But we had to choose replacement players, and we were very fortunate to choose George Grant, who had been outstanding at the University of Washington, and Jim Harney, who had been outstanding at Seattle U. And Harney not only was a great baseball player, but he was the point guard for Elgin Baylor and Seattle University.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, I was really having difficulty deciding which three would be the best to take. And Dale Bloom came to me. He was one of our pitchers. And he said, Doug, I played with Jim Harney in Edmonton when I played in the Canadian Amateur League up there. And he's one of the most fierce competitors that ever played. And that I kind of took that for granted and said, let's take the three studs. Monty Geiger, who consistently had beat us except for once, and those two. And so our team going back to the Nationals was basically a little bit of a combination of studs. And I'll never forget Harney. He had a brother who was a priest in Watertown, South Dakota, so he didn't want to stay with the team. And we thought about it, and finally we let it go. But anyway, he never, Earl, you remember how quiet he was. He never
Yes.
said a word on the train going back. We hardly ever remember anything. And so now we get to playing Fresno, California, and he's on second, and I'm coaching third. And Jack Johnson hits a deep fly to center field, and Harney tags up and comes to third. And he's safe as he could be, but the umpire calls him out. And this is in Watertown, South Dakota. And I literally, here's a guy who hadn't said a word on the whole trip, and I literally had to sit on him. Remember that, Earl? He's
Yep.
laying flat in his back in third, where he slid in third base. I had to sit on him for fear he was going
Oh,
to take the
man.
umpire and we were to lose him.
Yeah. Oh
Oh,
boy.
story.
That's it.
Earl, we talked a little bit. You had a chance to play pro ball. Were there other chances other than the one you had mentioned?
Not really, because when I'm one of those people when I make up my mind, hey, it's either or right now.
Right.
And when I live with my decisions that I make.
Yep.
And it's only a fair thing. To this wishy-washy, could be, might be, that's not me. It just didn't work out. The Korean War was really a bad thing for me because they lost 2 years that, my gosh, I'd love to have those in that minor league or wherever, because I always felt like, hey, you give me a bat, I'll hit. And I basically did.
Earl, you didn't get a chance to play in the service when you were there.
Yes, I did.
Did? Okay.
In fact, I played, the City League team picked me up.
In Tacoma?
No, in Alaska.
Oh, in Alaska.
Yeah. And they picked me up, and I played second base on that team. In fact, I broke my ankle fooling around with those guys. I still got a bone sticking out in the ankle. But it was an experience. We ended up winning that whole darn championship, and they had a pitcher on there, the Pacific Coast League pitcher, a left-hander. And we beat them, so had a whole lot of doings to do.
I think we talked about Earl hitting a home run. I happened to be there when it happened at Heidelberg Park, when they opened Heidelberg Park. That was with the Schumann.
Yes.
And then, of course, he hit the big home run in the Nationals with the Studs.
Yes.
So you had a great experience, I assume, playing with both.
Well, I feel like that I always, it's kind of odd. A lot of ball players think, well, I never had a chance. Nothing ever came my way. I feel like that I was put in the position to produce. And of all the luckiness in the world, I was able to produce. So I'm blessed with the way things have worked out, and I wouldn't trade my career with anything. I'm satisfied with what I've done.
Yeah, he
Well,
won-
you used the word lucky, but
No, he
I
wasn't
know
lucky.
the talent that you had.
He wanted to be there. He wanted to be the guy. You know, there's some guys that don't want to be there with a man on base. You know, like, oh God, I hope he gets a hit. I don't want to get, you know.
But it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't mean something.
Exactly. No,
It's hard to get that across to some of the younger people. All they want to do is lollygag around and kind of play at it. If you're going to play it, man.
Exactly.
You get out of it what you put into it. I love this story that I hear all the time. Everybody pulls off this whole, well, nobody gives me respect. Well, I'll tell you right now, you don't get given respect. You
Earn it.
Yeah.
And if you earn it, hey, take it home with you.
Exactly. No.
Did either of you think of coaching as a possible career?
I was coaching FAU. I was asked to coach FAU, nice Division I school down our way in Boca Raton, and I had like 15 kids drafted off of my program, and I get a call from the White Sox asking if I'd come fly up and interview for a job. And I says, I never asked to get back into baseball. So it came to me because of the success our program had at Florida Atlantic University. But having the experience, it was fun. I got to work with a lot of good ball players. To this day, we still stay in touch. I got to, at times, the only thing I didn't like, I wasn't able to see my son play as much as I would like, because I was coaching and he was with another team. So, but and I was not in the league he was in. So, but other than that, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But the game got to be different. They started to get into the stats and a whole different realm of things of coaching. Instead of having it in your heart and making moves and teaching things that you believe in, it got to be a lot of matchups, a lot of computerized matchups, and I didn't like that.
FAU, that was Florida Atlantic?
University, yeah. It's a good program now. We put it on the map, and I enjoyed it. I was there for like 4 years, and until I got the call to go to the White Sox, and it was like I said, I had great ball players that I was able to work with that went to the big leagues. And one of my kids out of coaching is a guy by the name of Anthony Rizzo, plays for the White Sox. He's one of my kids, so he's made a nice career for himself.
There's a photo here that we need to be. Oh, you go. I got one. Okay. Oh, yeah. Tell us about that photo.
Oh, man, these are my boys here. Well, you got Bill Murphy, you got Austin, yeah, you got all these guys. You got Ronnie Say. I still see Ronnie Say. Ronnie, his wife's parents live down our way, and we've had dinner a couple of times over the last few years. So he's another stud. I mean, Ronnie Say was one of the other studs. This one picture here is the Seattle Pilots, and again, I tell you a little bit about the Pilots. I was able to hit the last home run. I hit the last 2 home runs actually with the Pilots. The day before the season ended, and then the last day of the season, and that's when they started picking up everything in the clubhouse and putting them in vans, and we didn't know where we were going to go at that last game. He still didn't know if it was going to stay or they're going to go to what turned out to be Milwaukee. But if I would have had a couple of insight, I could have taken all the uniforms. I would be a multi-billionaire right now with all the Pilot uniforms. I mean, I never took anything out of the clubhouse, but that's one uniform I'd like to have.
Earl, did you ever think about coaching? You went into Parks and Rec work.
Yes, I did in basketball. We had the gymnasium, the War Memorial, and I coached an AAU team in the city, Seattle, and here. And Fort Lewis ended up beating us 151 to 150 for the championship.
That's a good one to end on, I think. 158 to 151. Okay.
Well,
Well,
but they were a good group of guys to be with, and
Yeah.
it was good.
That wraps it up, and so we'll call it Earl Hyder, Steve Whitaker,
Thank you,
Doug MacArthur. We're signing off right now. We've been talking about baseball. I know we've been talking about 65 years ago, but we tried to bring it to the present, and our memories are clear, and it was a great time in our lives.